the former President of the Republic of Chile for her statement. I now invite participants to listen to a statement by a youth representative. I invite Mr. Sameh Kamel, organizing partner of the major group for children and youth, to deliver the statement.
His Excellency Mr. Dennis Francis, President of the General Assembly, Her Excellency Ms. Paula Nareves, President of the Economic and Social Council, Her Excellency Ms. Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Her Excellency Ms. Michelle Bachelet, former President of Chile and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Excellencies, delegates, and fellow youth, good morning. My name is Sameh Kamel, a young surgeon from Egypt, and I serve as one of the 2 elected organizing partners of the major group for children and youth. I flew all the way from Egypt to be here at the high-level political forum, but so did all the children and youth in the gallery and on the floor right now, who are the faces, the human faces of the 2030 Agenda. The major group for children and youth serves as a designated self-led youth constituency for young people engaging in over 50 intergovernmental and 200 multilateral, multi-stakeholder processes. With a membership of over 10,000 youth-led, child-led, youth and child-serving organizations, we engage young people across the UN system on topics ranging from climate change, humanitarian affairs, human rights to migration, and so on. I will present some recommendations from our youth preparatory process towards the HLPF and Summit of the Future, including the ECOSOC Youth Forum 2024. Excellencies, eradicating poverty requires co-created solutions and accountable governance with collaboration between youth, governments, and civil society. The most underrepresented youth groups, including refugees, migrants, and indigenous youth, must be meaningfully engaged. On the road to the World Social Summit, we call on member states to take concrete action on debt relief and tax justice, invest in universal social protection systems, and ensure that major groups and other stakeholders are engaged in the Social Summit itself. Previously, the main expectation of food systems was to produce enough food to feed the world. Today, as we grow, increasingly aware of the environmental and social costs of focusing exclusively on food security, our agenda must be more ambitious. We call upon member states to head recommendations produced by the CFS Youth Constituency and Youth Declaration of the UN Food Systems Summit. To promote sustainability and advance climate action, leaving no one behind, we must embrace alternative economic and financial models, such as circular economy and community-based economics, which prioritizes intergovernmental equity over short-term profits. Member states must commit to a new collective quantified goal based on the challenges and lessons learned from the failed $100 billion climate fund goal. The new quantified goal must be aligned with the processes of NDCs and national adaptation plans and long-term low-emission development strategies. Excellencies, despite the growing momentum, children's environmental health remains severely neglected in this agenda. We call upon member states and the UN to develop coordinated strategies to issues of greatest concern to children's development and health in line with the right to a healthy environment. Ladies and gentlemen, the Peace-Building Architecture Review and ongoing Security Council reform are opportunities to enhance meaningful youth participation in security and peace-building discourses. We urge member states to commit to comprehensive strategies and dedicated funding for youth, peace and security agenda, including protecting youth in civic spaces. We also request that a process is launched to develop meaningful and universal youth engagement in the Security Council based on the existing models in other UN processes. Excellencies, the denial of young people's access to sexual and reproductive health rights is a critical violation of their human rights and undermines progress towards gender equality. As we mark the 30th anniversary of the ICPD and recall the commitments made in Cairo and at Beijing World Conference on Women, we call on member states to take concrete measures to guarantee sexual and reproductive health and justice for all, ensuring every young person has access to comprehensively sexuality education and the full range of sexual and reproductive health services free from stigma and discrimination. We also call upon you all to eliminate all legal, structural, financial, and systemic barriers to sexual and reproductive health. And the language on sexual and reproductive health must be maintained in the Pact of the Future. There can be no backsliding on rights and choices. Ladies and gentlemen, financing, monitoring, and actions on pollution and health, including plastic pollution and the sound management of chemicals and waste, must be significantly scaled up to meet the goals of the new global framework on chemicals, UN Common Approach to Pollution, and existing MEAs. In the months ahead, we must further deliver on an effective, legally binding global plastic treaty across the full life cycle of plastic pollution and establish a multidisciplinary science policy panel on chemicals and waste free from the conflicts of interest. Both these frameworks must ensure designated and meaningful representation of the major groups and other stakeholders. Excellencies, it is not enough to simply engage grassroots and minority communities at transient events or consultations. We need frontline communities in long-term leadership roles. When peaceful environmental and human rights defenders are silenced, our communities, our causes, and our futures are silenced with them. We call upon you to protect environmental and human rights defenders. We stand in solidarity with peaceful young protesters around the world that continue to face hurdles in their advocacy. Excellencies, young people have participated in our common agenda since UN 75 process, convening an Our Common Agenda Youth Partners Group. Additionally, a dedicated youth working group on the Summit of the Future was established in October 2022 to bring collective youth perspective to the Pact, with more than 30 youth constituencies hosted to date. Young people's demands are clear. First, we demand an urgent reform of the international financial architecture to be outlined in the Pact. This is not just about balancing in the text and negotiations. It is about our lives, which must not be spent living with the consequences of illegitimate debts. The boards of the Multilateral Development Bank must make an observer seat available for youth constituencies, learning from the models at the CTCN and Science Policy Business Forum. Second, regarding Declaration on Future Generations, we need urgent, bold, and responsive multilateralism to protect current and future generations. We have seen many envoys come and go, including a youth envoy. How will a future generations envoy change that? We are considering the three options presented in the draft, and we recommend that more progressive models are pursued, such as a dedicated office or a committee on future generations. Third, the ECOSOC Youth Forum, which is the largest and most diverse youth forum in the UN and arguably in the world, should serve as a platform for stocktake and review of youth-specific commitments in the Pact and its annexes. The current format of the ECOSOC Youth Forum, which is jointly organized by UN agencies and youth constituencies, should be retained and strengthened. Ladies and gentlemen, the major groups and other stakeholders mechanism serves as a designated and universal space for civil society engagement in multiple UN avenues. Whenever new processes and summits are initiated, especially under the auspices of the General Assembly, civil society must be ensured at the inception stage and co-designed in partnership with major groups and stakeholders. We should not have to advocate for engagement in new processes from scratch every time. Furthermore, we call for establishing an agenda item on strengthening civil society engagement in the high-level committee on programs. This agenda must address concrete action items, such as requiring each UN agency to nominate a civil society focal point and developing a handbook on meaningful civil society engagement in partnerships with the major groups and other stakeholders. MGCY works with informal and grassroots groups globally. However, the engagement of youth in the UN system must be enhanced by better responding to the administrative and supportive infrastructure needs of youth organizations. It is not enough to only provide grants for UN agencies to design programmatic work on youth. We must meet young people where they are, building on models seen in Stockholm Plus 50, GFMD process, and others. We call upon member states and the UN to provide direct financial and technical support to youth constituencies so that they can self-organize their participation. We call attention to the document titled Principles and Barriers for Meaningful Youth Engagement, written by youth and published by the Department of Economic and Social Affairs of the United Nations. It highlights 5 principles. Youth engagement must be self-organized, legally mandated, rights-based, designated, well-resourced, and accountable. No more youth advisory boards or panels that are appointed or handpicked by UN agencies without consulting or feedback mechanisms. Youth are calling for representative structures driven by youth and are universal and equitable. As I conclude, I reiterate our call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in all conflicts across the world. The prevalence of impunity in the face of clear violation of international humanitarian and human rights law leads to a growing loss of faith in international law and reconciliation. We remain extremely concerned about the significant number of dead and displaced persons, the majority of whom are vulnerable women, children, and youth. As children and youth, we refuse to be the mass casualties of a military-industrial complex. Thank you very much.
Doy las gracias al señor.
I thank Mr. Kamel for his statement. Honourable heads of state and government, honourable ministers, excellencies, distinguished delegates, we have heard the last speaker for the opening segment, and I once again thank the distinguished speakers for their enriching contributions. That concludes the high-level opening.